Hello everyone, this video is designed to show you guys how to properly conduct the protocol of feeding the fruit flies. I'll be going over why these flies are getting fed, how and when to starve the flies before the feeding, how to prepare the 5% sucrose and the various probiotic and postbiotic interventions, how to properly feed the flies through the capillaries, and finally when to do the feeding. So let's begin. To start, I'll be talking about why we conduct the feeding. The feeding is designed to test the palatability of the interventions, which essentially means how well do the interventions taste for the flies. And this includes the control flies and the flies overexpressing the genes seen in Alzheimer's disease. Before the feeding, we need to starve the flies. Starvation usually occurs around 10 or 11 a.m. before the doses. The way we starve the flies is this vial on the left is a starvation vial. This contains distilled water and agar, while the vial on the right contains the flies. So we take the cotton balls off. Since the one on the right contains flies, you need to be careful to prevent them from flying away. So you just tap the vial, take the cotton ball off really fast, and just tap all the flies into the starvation vial. And then you just put the cotton ball back. You then transfer the label onto the starvation vial. This label contains wherever the fly is, a control fly or an AD fly, is the sex, the day of birth, the intervention, the cohort, and the number of flies in the vials. You record these values in the notebook. To prepare the 5% sucrose, I measured out the sucrose in a weigh boat and got some distilled water. To prepare 5%, if I use 1 milliliter of distilled water, I need 50 milligrams of sucrose. What I do first is use a syringe, get a pipette, and this syringe is calibrated to 1 milliliter. I push the syringe down into the distilled water, push it back up, and the distilled water is inside this pipette. I insert it into this vial. So now there's 1 milliliter inside this vial, and this pipette goes to waste. I then pour the sucrose powder into the vial with the distilled water. And then next I close the vial and then put it into this vortex. This will saturate the solution and get rid of any sucrose particles that are in the distilled water. You should keep doing this until you should not see any particles inside the water. Like so. And now we're done making the 5% sucrose. To make the probiotic or postbiotic interventions, we need to make a 1:2 ratio of the probiotic or postbiotic with the 5% sucrose we just made. I have the 5% sucrose here labeled, and I got 50 microliters of the postbiotic, which we'll be using for this feeding. If I'm using 50 microliters of the postbiotic, we need 100 microliters of the sucrose to make the 1:2 ratio. So I have this syringe calibrated to 100 microliters. I take the 5% sucrose, push the syringe down, and then get 100 microliters of the sucrose into the pipette. Then I just open this little vial with the postbiotic and just push down and keep just pushing it down to saturate the solution. And then you have the 1:2 ratio of the postbiotic and sucrose. To actually feed the flies, we need to get some of the postbiotic intervention onto this little parafilm that I cut here. So what we do is we get 10 microliters into this syringe. I have it calibrated here. You just push the syringe down like before. You take some of the intervention out, and you just get some little droplets into this parafilm. I like to sometimes do extra, just in case I either mess up or I just don't have enough. So for instance, since I need 2 droplets, I'm actually gonna do 3. And here you have 10 microliter droplets of the postbiotic intervention onto this parafilm. To feed the flies, I have the original starvation vial with the label indicating what types of flies and the sex of flies that are inside this vial. I replaced the cotton ball with this foam that contains these little tubes, which is how we insert the capillaries in the tubes. To feed the flies, I use these thin capillaries. I make sure I hold the orange part on the top, and I just gently tilt it to where I could get the droplet of the postbiotic intervention inside the capillary, like so. You make sure you don't close the tip of the capillary so the droplet won't go inside. And you just do that. And I'll do this extra one just in case. And this is how you get the droplets inside the capillaries. There we go. Since we got the postbiotic droplets inside the capillaries, we need to measure how much are in the capillaries. To do that, you should see a darker liquid inside the capillaries, and you measure the start to the end of it. So for instance, this bottom capillary has 4.8 centimeters worth of postbiotic, while this middle one has approximately, actually this top one has approximately it has 5. So we use these two, and then insert it inside the vial. You have the orange tip at the top, and you just gently push them inside the vial. Make sure you're able to see the tips of the capillaries inside the vial, and you make sure you don't want to make the capillaries touch the starvation. Just make sure you don't want them to touch the agar inside the vial. If that happens, you need to replace the capillary. You then record how much of the postbiotic was in each capillary in the notebook, as before. This concludes the first part of feeding. What needs to happen next is this vial needs to go inside one of the incubators to store for next morning, which next morning we conduct the next part of feeding, the next dose, where we replace these capillaries, measure out how much is remaining, record it in the notebook, and refeed the flies with the same process as I shown earlier. We do this 4 times in a duration of in a 2-week regimen. Between each of the doses, we need to stop the experiment. By stopping the experiment just means we transfer these flies in the starvation vial to ones with like the normal food vial, and just keep those in the incubator as well. After the 4 doses, we stop the experiment again and then test the flies for their climbing ability or locomotive capacities.